welcome to CHGO Red Stars podcast presented by Giraffe Kings. Make sure you link up with DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top rated sportsbook. Download the app and use promo code CHGO when you sign on up and make your bets. Hey, everybody, it's me, Sandra. It's you, Claire. And we're here to talk all things Chicago Red Stars. I hope everyone's enjoying the way we're rolling out the content here on CHGO when it comes to all things Chicago Red Stars. Just to remind everyone, if you're catching up with us, we're doing these kind of bi-weekly, once a month-ish, kind of we're like making sure we gather as much Chicago Red Stars game information and before we basically go on live and on an episode. So if you joined us last time, we talked a little bit about Chicago's early phases of the season, Valpue being gone for the remainder of the season with her injury. And now we're back and we get to talk about pretty heavy loss that they had to sustain. We got to talk a little bit about the draw that they just had against Washington Spirit. And we get to talk about the introduction of Challenge Cup for the Chicago Red Stars moving forward. But it's a lot to get through. And I'm just happy to do that with you, buddy. How you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, it's sort of an interesting time to check in, right? It's like there was a big low point a couple weeks ago. The game this weekend was like better, but it was a draw. They're sitting in 11th right now. So it's like things feel like it was like kind of like a downswing, and then we're like kind of turning the corner. Maybe we'll see. And then we're going into the 3-game week, right? So we've got game on Wednesday and then a game on Sunday. So
got games on games,
man. I don't know if you know this, but during the NWSL season, they play games
pretty often, actually.
Yeah, arguably every week.
They said World Cup, we love games.
Yeah.
And let's have more of them. Chicago Red Stars, it's funny because it's like we're talking about all these games that they're going to have coming up, but we're actually going to like recollect on the couple of games that we got to watch. One was on the road, so we weren't present there, but we were present for this Spirit game. But let's try to do this as chronological as possible. Chicago Red Stars went back on the road, headed back to the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, to take on OL Reign. And let's just rip that Band-Aid right off. Wasn't a pretty scoreline. 5-2 whooping. OL Reign put on Chicago Red Stars. And at this point, this is their week 4 match, right? So we're looking ahead already to week 5. 22 games in a regular season, not counting Challenge Cup. So for week 5, kind of like, okay, we're looking at this for like putting this first quarter of the season behind us. Like where are the Red Stars? What are they showing us at this point? And it wasn't great. Wasn't great. We've seen the continuation of this 3-back, this 3-4-3 with that OL Reign game. And within it, I think we kind of got to see probably one of the first really tough days at the office for what's pretty good individual players when we're talking about like Turner Davidson or Casey Kruger, Alyssa Nair, and maybe it brought up some questions about like midfield support because this team just had a tough like game against OL Reign despite trying to make a game of it. That's the other thing I think that's coming out of Chicago. It's like they're gonna apparently they're gonna concede some goals, but they might score some as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like we talked about last time, right? The way that they play is incredible, or the way that they have played. I mean, we'll talk about the Washington game. They did make some adjustments there, but the way that they played their first 4 games was incredibly high risk. It was very aggressive. They play a very high line. They were giving their wingbacks kind of free rein to push forward aggressively. Yeah, you can kind of see, I mean, not incredibly connected, right? But I think you can kind of see here how that 3-back it's a true 3-back. Bianca St. George gets very high. That actually didn't change from the Seattle game to the Washington game, but yes. And I think the way that worked last year was due to a lot of support from your dual sixes, right? So you think, okay, we're going to have kind of this box of the two center backs and the two defensive midfielders to provide this support centrally. And that's how we're going to negate the other team's attack while also giving ourselves a lot of width and the ability to push numbers forward, right? And just I think what we saw instead was consistent 4 versus 3 overloads. The Rain started 4 forwards. They do that. That's not a
Yeah.
new tactic from them. And all of those issues aside, they just gave up some really soft goals. So it's like the two things happened, right? There are definitely a lot of larger personnel and tactical discussions to have, I think, with Chicago, and I think they're having them. But and they talked about this after the Washington game. It also just first and second balls, they were not winning them. Once the shot was off, they were not getting in front of it. They did not block the shots. That was one of Alyssa Nayer's roughest days at the office that I can remember in recent memory. And I just think that just for whatever reason, the commitment to full team defending, and I'm not placing it all on the back line, was not there. And I think that's how you see, like, take a look, like you see here, right? The Rain scored 5 goals on basically 1 goal of XG.
Oof.
And that's simply just not good enough. And I think the Red Stars were very clear about that even after that game.
Expected goals less than 1 and walking away with getting 5 dunked on you doesn't feel great. Maybe we dip into that a little bit because it's like I think people, maybe you see a score line like that and there's like maybe a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, right? It's like, oh, like what's going on with the back line? This is crazy. Oh no, like listen there, there's a World Cup in front of you, and it's kind of like just pause for a second here, everyone. Like maybe let's take a look at the big picture in front of you, and maybe that's what we're looking at. We're also looking at things positionally or line by line. Is it just like this, the whole like generalized question of like, oh, is there trouble with the 3 backers or trouble with the 3 individuals back there? But then you can also maybe ask like the other side of that. You can act like, well, is there like a lack of midfield support right now for this team in this formation and how things look? Is it a matter of like personnel still getting adjusted to these, the formation or position on the pitch? I mean, we've talked a little bit about, Nagasato playing a lower role for this team, and this is a player that's been with the Red Stars essentially. we forget about that 1 year loan in Louisville, but has mostly been with the Red Stars since 2017, and hasn't necessarily had to play in this kind of defensive mid type of role.
She's not a ball winner. That's just not, it has never been her job.
Yeah, so it's just like I think it's just kind of, I don't want to say lazy or easy, but I think it's just kind of simple to say like, oh, like maybe the back 3 doesn't work, or like what's going on with the back 3. But it's just like, if you're going to ask that question, it's like maybe you have to ask certain questions across the lines as well.
Well, I mean, I think it was indicative of, well, I don't know exactly what happened, to be completely honest. It was such an outlier performance for a number of individuals, and I'm like, I don't know if there's a way for me just to like sit here from home and be like, I know what happened, because I'm not sure I do. But I think maybe it's possible that there was, an element of mental strain of, you've got 3 games in, and you have been trying to cover a lot of ground as a 3 back. They're very stretched. And just when you do have waves of pressure like that you're constantly putting out fires, maybe it does just get to a point where it's difficult to keep the energy up the whole time, because it's just, there's a lot of strain to what you're doing. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. And I think that is the question, right? They talked after the Houston game about not being happy with turnovers in the midfield. I think what we saw in the Seattle game was an issue of turnovers for sure, but also just like you said, sort of that imbalance of, you don't have like Danny Colaprico's gone, right? Yeah. Vanessa DiBernardo is gone. And so those basic systems that you had in place in your midfield are no longer there. And also, just quite frankly, right, you just don't have a player who from the beginning of their career has been winning balls in the midfield. Like that is a player that was not really like for like replaced. And so I think what we saw is a lot of players that have a lot of things that they can do quite well, but the way they were set up was just sort of maybe highlighting weaknesses instead of strengths. And I think that just caused the back line to self-destruct a little bit.
Maybe we're looking at perhaps what could be like considered silver linings out of like a game like this. Rookies really playing a role in Chicago's early phase of the season. I think maybe we anticipated that a little bit with as much turnover that there was in the offseason. We're still seeing starts for Penelope Hawking. We're starting to see Allison Schlegel kind of get really in the mix with this team, and we saw her score a goal for the Red Stars in this very lopsided scoreline.
It's a great
Right.
goal too.
Yeah, great, fantastic, and
Yeah.
love the timing of this. It's like right out in the gate in the second half. But those were like the little things I think maybe you're looking at and kind of taking away and trying to maybe build on into the next game in front of you.
Yeah, I think the positive is like set pieces continue to be a strength. That was something that I wasn't sure what those would look like when Swanson went down, and it seems like they've put some thought into their set piece approach. Like they've gone short sometimes. They've tried a couple different things to open space up on corner kicks, which I think has gone well. I think it was Ella Stevens also who took some this last weekend. So they're figuring that out in the absence of Swanson, which I think is a positive. And yeah, I think in some funny ways, we talk about sort of maybe a lack of depth in certain areas, but they have a lot of young, generally attacking players. Like they've got Ava Cook, they've got Sarah Griffith, they've got Penelope Hawking, they've got Ali Schlegel, who's had a very good 2-game run. Bianca St. George at this point is like basically an attacker for them. They've got a lot of players who can play make, and they are scoring. They have not stopped doing that. But I do think what we saw, and I think the team conceded this, is at some point it's too much. You're conceding too much in a desire to get numbers forward and playing that high line and getting, basically playing like a 3, like almost like a 3-2-3-2, where you've just got these isolated defensive midfielders who are maybe not super comfortable in that role. And then you've got the isolated 3 back, and the Reign just like feasted on that. It was too easy. They would just go inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside. And it, yeah, just
And again,
can't do that against them.
It was like a meme. It went from worse to worser, like after the course of 90 minutes. No, I feel you. It's definitely not. I don't know if there are folks out there who maybe look at just the scoreline of this game and see, or maybe grab the highlights even and look at it as like a confident performance. Like, hey, you know what the Red Stars are here right now? A sure bet. I don't know if people have that thought when they take a look at this scoreline, when they maybe take a look at this game. But the NWSL as a whole is a tough league, I think, to maybe place some bets on. But if you find yourself in the betting mood, maybe you want to go ahead and download DraftKings Sportsbook to go ahead and make some bets. Because in case you didn't know, CHGO covers all sports, and it's also NBA playoff time. So that means there's big hoop action with DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. You can get in on the excitement of every game with the touch of a button. And new customers can make a $5 pregame money bet and score $150 in bonus bets if their team wins. Plus, everyone can score a no-sweat same-game parlay every day during the NBA playoffs. You just got to open the DraftKings Sportsbook app, opt in, and place a same game parlay on any NBA game. And if it doesn't hit, you'll get a bonus bet to back up $10. So make sure you go ahead and download the app right now. Sign on up with code CHGO. New customers make a $5 pregame moneyline bet. You can get $150 in bonus bets if the team wins. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code CHGO. Now, NWSL might not be the kind of league that folks make safe bets on because of all the chaos that can be produced here within week in and week out. Because the Red Stars go from a very tough 7-goal kind of game where they're the losers in that one, 5-2. But on the horizon, looking ahead to week 5, there was a game against Washington Spirit, one of the teams who, in their early stretches of the season, undefeated. And I think if you go through like what your first 5 weeks of the season, that first quarter of the season, you could say you're unbeaten. I think you're pretty proud of that. But going into this game, I think maybe you see the opposition that you're going to face, even if it's on the road. They just got whooped 5-2. At this point, like you said, Claire, teams have presented the overloads to Chicago. It's maybe could have come off as a little bit predictable. It's like, hey, we know how we're going to prepare for this team. Let's go. So to see the Red Stars host the Spirit with attackers like Trinity Rodman, Ashley Hatch, Ashley Sanchez, I was curious what we were going to see in terms of just the response from a loss like that, because it's one thing to like lose in this league, and it's one thing to like feel like you had a really bad game as well.
I think also an interesting dynamic is the against, especially with Swanson out, the players that are dealing with this defensively are the veterans, right? Like it's not like there's a dynamic of like, oh, we're helping like some rookies get their feet wet and it's going to be touch and go and we're going to just kind of see what happens. Like I think there is an issue. I mean, like for the team themselves, they are the veterans. They are the players that are competing for World Cup spots. They are the people who have been with this team for a long time and maybe understand that this season isn't going to be quite what perhaps other seasons in the past have been, but they want it to be productive. And so I do think that there is a point of pride to it. And so they pulled Aaron Wright back a little bit. And I think that was, I don't think it was, I would be interested. Like, it's not like a full traditional 4-back, but it was a more like, we cannot have both of these wing backs pushing forward as much as they have been. Yeah. So as you can see, it's pretty close, right? Pretty close to just a back 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
With St. George basically just becoming then a winger.
A giant red bubble, according to the
exactly. Yeah, and I think it worked. I mean, I think we know that the Spirit have a lot of talent on their wing, right? The Trinity Rodman was switching sides, right? She was on right side, and then she switched over to Milazzo's side, and it just seemed like the comfortability in 1v1 defending, knowing that you were not required to like be the last line of defense at all times. I think it made a big difference. I think the midfield issues still exist. I think you can kind of see it in the numbers. Chicago conceded a lot of shots. They had a lot of block shots. They created a lot of clearances. So I think the interesting thing now is Chicago needed to make some changes so that the back line could better weather what they've been dealing with. And then it's like, well, what if they didn't have to? What if they didn't? You know?
What if?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, here's some more numbers for folks who are, fans of the number side of the game. Clearances in this game. The Chicago Red Stars closing out this game with 35 clearances against Washington Spirit compared to 8 for the Spirit side of things. But it just didn't. There were stretches of that game. And I don't think maybe you look across the 6 games that took place over week 5. And maybe you circle a couple games and you're like, those were the chaos queens. Like those were chaos queen type of games. And then we literally had another abandoned weather game, right? And like that, you circle it, that was the weather game. And then I think you look at like a game like this and you're just like, well, maybe this wasn't like the prettiest game of soccer. But I think if you're the Red Stars coming off of a loss like you had in week 4, this feels like maybe like at least a lateral next step in this very long journey of your season. So I think like for me, like, because we went and we took this game in person, and I absolutely want to like shout that out because that in itself was like a dope experience. It was great to see you. It was great to see so many people coming out to cover the Chicago Red Stars. Shout out to Annie of the Sun Times. Shout out to Andre who covers the Spirit. And it was just great to link up with everyone and our Gal Pal Sports friends as well. And I wanted to see just a response. Like even if the Red Stars kind of went into this game and went up again against a really good attacking team and came out with an L, with another loss, I still wanted it to be like respectable. I wanted to see like a good response in performance, and I think we got a little bit more than that. I mean, they ended up getting an equalizer for the draw, and I think when we're talking a little bit about, oh, shout out to the race plot again. Shout out to Ariel.
Yeah.
And this one, I think this is actually a lot of fun because if we're looking at the if we're looking at
Talk about the clearances and the
the
blocked
actual
shots and the gritty
clearance,
defending.
yeah,
Yeah.
the XG in this game for the
Yeah.
Spirit compared to what we saw out of all rain, you're talking almost like 3
Right.
for the XG, 2.87 versus the 1.17 for Chicago. It's like, oh, that's where the clearances came from.
Yeah.
Because there was so much kind of defensive shape work that they were, presenting for the Spirit. But I think like initially, even like going back to like the kickoff of this game, like looking at the starting lineup for this team, I thought that was also like very interesting. Like I remember you and I chatting a little bit about it and how um it was another start for Hawking, and then we're seeing another start for CHGO in this game. Again, it's like the two Penn Staters like getting a chance to build over the course of a game. But it made me curious if like this was like maybe a bit of a planned starting 11, just knowing what is gonna be on the horizon for this team with the heavy match load with like including Challenge Cup, or was this like a starting 11 that maybe was more reflective of kind of like what have you done for the team lately? So it was a mixed bag for me.
Yeah, it seems like they're really rotating the younger players. I mean, obviously, I think like we saw, CHGO was an obvious bright spot off of the bench against Seattle.
Yeah.
Rewarded for that with a
Mhm.
start, and she gets an assist. So that's a player that's performing. I mean, we've talked about how Hawking is. It certainly also just seems to be like a very durable player, and she is able to do a lot of disrupting off that on the front line. And it's still kind of working her way. Like she had that really great game against Kansas City, and I think this is pretty typical rookie stuff where there's going to be ebbs and flows, and so she's still sort of figuring out that shot again. But yeah, so I liked the start for Schlegel. I like the idea that they're not being too precious with consistent starts. Obviously, in the defense, that's going to be very important. But for the rest of it, it's like who's playing best in practice, who's training the best, who had a good game, and I think that that's going to be helpful during the Challenge Cup as well. But it does sort of leave, like I said, they just have sort of this roster imbalance where there are players that I think could help a little bit more who are having some trouble getting time. And it's been really interesting specifically, and we talked about this in the press box, that we had these rookies last year in Ava Cook and Sarah Griffith who came off the bench or got these starts and did quite well. And we're like, great, rookies, love it. Rookie season doing great. And then now this year, we're seeing that same approach to this year's rookies. But now the second year players are having some more trouble getting on the pitch. And so I just think that I have not, and certainly do not have enough information to criticize it, but I just think it's an interesting point that we're seeing this new round of rookies be the ones who are making an impact rather than the rookies from last year.
No, 100%. I'm with you on that. I think that like was one of my reactions. It's like, yeah, if we're looking at even just last year, it's like Ava Cook, Sarah Griffith were rookies who impressed us last year, right? And we're looking at this year in Hawking and Schlegel as two rookies who are also impressing us. But in that sense, where we're 5 weeks in and we're looking at like consecutive starts at this point for Penelope Hawking, I think outside of I think Emily Madrill for Orlando Pride might have
Hawking started all 5 games.
Yeah,
right?
might have the most minutes right now in terms of rookies, because there was a game there or two question mark that like Alyssa Thompson for Angel City like didn't start. So I'm just like looking at like just minutes loads. I think for some of the rookies who are making their paths in the league as professionals for the first time, and I think those two might be neck and neck in terms of first 5-week minutes. And maybe that's also coming in line with the fact that yes, they have lost Mal Pugh, so they want to try to give those minutes in certain directions on across the line. But I think maybe pivoting a little bit from from the rookies. Shout out to Sarah. Good comment on second year players. Yeah, Ava Cook and Jill. Yeah.
Yeah, Jill too. Yeah, that was a good
It's a
shout.
great,
Yeah.
another great player to bring
Yeah.
up, Jill Aguilera as well. Another one of those rookies that we liked during 2021, who was asked a lot of, really, because this was a player that wasn't initially drafted, was sort of like picked up by the Red Stars as she went undrafted out of Arizona. And primarily, again, a more of an attacking type of player, but got asked to kind of, square peg herself into a wingback position, but kind of embraced that and was able to perform adequately, I think, in 2021. So we are still looking, to sort of see those rotations, and I'm sure we'll see them with the introduction of Challenge Cup.
To that point, positionally, though, I found it really interesting, or I find it interesting, what they did against Washington, especially with Bianca St. George, which it's like, we're not, basically, they kind of, what's the right way to put this? They stopped asking her to have to track back as much.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like, to be frank, like, that wasn't happening as much anyway, because she was so important to the attack. So then when they had Milazzo actually, like, literally behind her, it's like, no, you're a midfielder. It's fine. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And she was incredibly important for the goal that they did score. Not only scoring it, but she started that play, right? She was the one who sent the ball out wide in the first place. So what do you think of BSG Chicago midfielder? Question mark.
Look, I'm here for
Milazzo
it.
looked great as an outside back, I thought.
I'm here for it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, well, we pivot a little bit. Maybe we're like pivoting away from the rookies and not even mentioning the second year players, but some of these players who are in their third or fourth seasons with the Red Stars already. Yeah, for sure, Jamie. It is a long season.
Well, this week too, we might see a lot of rotation.
That's what we're probably going to see, the rotation for sure. We'll chat about it a bit when we focus in on Challenge Cup. But no, Tatum Milazzo, I thought, had one of her better games of these opening 5 weeks for the Red Stars, and I think now that BSG has kind of like reintegrated herself into these starting 11s after starting off the season with what appeared to be like a small knock. Now that she's kind of getting consecutive starts or more extended minutes, it's just like you could just sort of see across the board of this roster, like who the players are going to be in terms of like when you're looking at the Red Sox roster, like who are the key players. And you know that you're out of a Mal Pugh, and I think folks will automatically flock to international players and say like Alyssa Nair is a key player, Tierna Davidson, Casey Kruger are key players. And yes, those things are true. But I think in terms of experience and time with this roster, you're also highlighting an Aaron Ray. You're also highlighting a Tatum Milazzo. You're definitely highlighting a Bianca St. George. And I have really enjoyed her performances over the course of the opening like 5 weeks, but I really liked this game out of BSG. I think we had that earlier pass network on there, and she was a big bright red bubble on that pass network. And there's been a few times where I've looked at Bianca St. George and I'm like, going to the World Cup, possibly, question mark, in my opinion. I think she's making a case for sure when it comes to Canada's national team, but had the goal, and it was cool for us to chat with her post game of this match, and she was just like, yeah, I can't wait to watch that goal back because I kind of blacked out when I scored it. But cool to sort of see her kind of give the props to the rookie, and ALLCITY kind of serving it up, and just smart on St. George to continue that kind of run into the box, to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. No, I thought all of that was positive. And like I said, I think we've hopefully we're being coherent and sort of clear when we're kind of saying that Chicago's has had these moments of buildup that are great. Like really, truly, like the team buildup in that goal was great. When they do successfully get numbers forward, I think that you see just really cool stuff from players that we're less familiar with. And so it's more just, I think, like this cost benefit analysis constantly of like, what are you giving up by giving numbers support to those players and not numbers support to your back line. Right. And so for me, like, I think we've been pretty clear. Like, I think this is truly, we just need to take it. I think if you're a Chicago fan, take it game by game. You're just like looking for bright spots. You're looking for cool things to build on. And then I think also just the final thing, and this, I don't know, maybe this is just it, but I think it would be really great if Chicago would stop giving up penalties.
You know what? I would love to see it.
Yeah.
If we're talking,
it's just so disheartening. Look, they're like working their butts off and they're like clearing the ball and they're getting into spaces and then bam.
It's penalty. Like, if you don't give up that pen, what does this game look like? Yeah, no,
Right.
I feel you 100% on that, man.
Yeah.
And there was just like no, I don't want to say even like fight within it, because we saw that very early moment with Ella Stevens, and she even kind of like smiled and laughed about it. It was literally like of course,
Yeah.
like of course we just gave up a pen kind of moment.
Yep.
Tough, man, not gonna lie, especially with like the era of VAR officially in full
Yeah.
swing,
Is
right?
that their third penalty conceded in 5 games? Is
You
that
know what?
right?
Somebody stat check us in the chat. I
Yeah,
would
I think that's
appreciate
right.
it, because
I know it was the
it
first 2
honestly,
games.
I think there was the
No,
first
they've done
two.
4.
I
There
was
was
gonna say, I
one in the
think
Kansas City game too.
every week, it almost feels like every week there's been a penalty. I think there's
Yeah.
maybe one week where there wasn't, but it's a tough ratio,
Mhm.
honestly. If you're Chicago looking at this game. Look, I think they're like, they're totally aware of it too. Like, it's not something that they're like, obviously try not to dwell on it. I mean, even with the performance against the Rain, I mean, getting a chance to talk to Petroselli, to
Mhm.
St. George, to Kruger in the post game, they were like, that sucked, man. Like that was tough. Kruger saying that coming out of that game and having to have those conversations with each other was like very emotional,
Yeah.
to like try to make sure that they improved and made adjustments and had a better performance, in week 5. So, looking forward to continuing to see maybe some of these small things that they can kind of like have considered as like small wins on the pitch,
Yeah.
and go ahead and improve on. Shout out to Thomas saying the lopsided 4-3-2-1 worked better than the 3-5-2,
It
almost a
did.
3-4-3. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
disagree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, I think that's the other side of this too. Like, as we're kind of continuing to talk about the Red Stars kind of as a whole, like in general for these first five weeks, as we look at the quarter of the season behind us, like things within these weeks, it's like it's early enough in the season, or you tell yourself it's early enough in the season where you're like, what if we tried this, or what if
Mhm.
we tried that? Now, as we're looking ahead a little bit, I don't know if you're still like pivoting away from that, essentially. Like, do they get to a point in this next quarter of the season where they're like, we need to like nail it down, and like this is who we have to be moving forward?
I think it's an interesting question, right? Because I think you look at that Washington game, which I think we all agree was a positive step from the Seattle game, but they were purely defending for the last half hour. It was,
Yes.
we almost were laughing at times. There were moments where Carrie Riccaro was just booting it up. She's just like,
Boom,
get
hoof it,
that ball
hoof it,
away from me,
hoof that
Uh,
dang ball.
yeah. Um, and I think that's what they needed in that moment, because I do think that the whole game they were focused, incredibly focused on that particular element. But if you are gonna have, we know in NWSL how this is. If that is the approach, it's like kind of like Angel City last year, maybe you just
Yeah.
get, it's a very, very physically taxing way to play, and it
Oh yeah.
makes getting results difficult. And I think, yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about the midfield, right? And I think what we've seen over the first 5 games is a midfield that can move the ball forward but can't really hold it,
Yeah.
and also has trouble with turnovers in
Mhm.
bad places.
Yeah.
Um, and then also struggles in defensive transition once the ball starts moving quickly in the other direction. We're not seeing those mistakes being corrected by the midfield itself. It usually falls on to the defensive line.
Mm.
Um, and so I think that that's a very disruptive way to have to play. It doesn't really let you get into a flow, doesn't really let you control tempo. You kind
Yeah.
of have to concede tempo to the other team. And it's going to be incredibly difficult, I think, outside of maybe just really focusing on getting things, just always getting things wide, just like 100% of the time. Just like if the defensive midfield gets the ball, we recycle it out wide, we bring it back in. Like, you can make adjustments, but I do think I agree that when you see some of the struggles, it's because they're trying to play like they played last year with a
Yeah.
completely different midfield. And
Yeah. It's
I
a new
think that,
team.
yeah, it's just a different team.
It's a
And
different team.
yeah, and I think they are working through that, but it'll be really interesting to see. What I would love to see is some, or maybe whatever tweaks you can make to move the ball a little bit quicker, get it into the to the feet of people that you feel comfortable with them on the dribble, and then maybe just that defensive positioning so that it's a little bit easier for these defensive midfielders who are a little bit less used to having to, like, you know, crush heads
Yep.
in the trenches, so that they feel like they're put in the right place, because I do think that that is something that is difficult as an individual to adjust to, is literally just knowing where to be in different possession or non-possession scenarios.
I think we've seen it almost feels like it took 5 weeks,
Yeah.
but it sort of seems like we saw at least a minor adjustment to try to make sure that they were not pounced on or drowning in overload. So I'm curious to see what can happen on the road in Challenge Cup against the Dash, and even looking ahead a little bit more when they're back at home against Gotham FC on May 7th. Which, if you're looking for tickets, I gotta say, you gotta try the Game Time app. Make sure you check out Game Time to see all the best deals for when you're looking at targeting which specific Red Stars game you want to go and check out, because buying tickets to your favorite game shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, even music and comedy and theater events near you, because we all go here. We're all Chicagoans, right? Hee hee. And we love music and we also love theater as well. So you can find all kinds of great events with the Game Time app. They've got flash deals and last minute tickets. They got easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in the area. You get images of the seat views, you get the lowest prices guarantee, event cancellation protection, all of that great stuff. So make sure you utilize the
And
Game
as we
Time
know,
app.
there are some cheap tickets out there right
There
now
are
for
there
some
are
certain Chicago sports teams, so
They're
jump on it.
trying. They're trying to get rid of those tickets. But look, you can also use code CHGO for $20 off when you use the Game Time app. So, make sure you check it out and use that code CHGO. But yeah, only for the Gotham game, because that's the one that's actually going to be at home. They're going to be on the road this week. They're going to Houston to kick off the Challenge Cup round one. They were the only team, them and Racing Louisville. They were not able to kick off their Challenge Cup in the round one that took place last week. But they're going to go ahead and face Houston Dash at Shell Energy Stadium in Houston, Texas. You can watch that tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff. You can catch it on Paramount Plus. Just saying, hee hee. When we're looking at this, maybe we're going to see some of that rotation we were talking about a little bit. Maybe we're gonna see Jill Aguilera. Maybe we're gonna see Ava Cook. Maybe we're gonna see Sarah Griffin. And I would love to see it. I would love
Yeah,
to.
I'm really curious to see what happens with the defense, to be honest. I think um center backs, you have a little bit more leeway for starts if they do have this more traditional outside back structure. I don't think you can play Erin Wright through all of these games. I don't think that's probably good for her load management.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious to see what they do with the back line, because again, that feels slightly thinner. Like, do you start
Yeah.
Aguilera? She's played wing back, but
Yeah.
maybe do you put her at traditional outside back? That's a little bit different. I know that Amanda Kowalski has been sort of dealing with some lingering injury stuff, so I don't know exactly how fit she is to go. And just interested. I know they have another defensive rookie who hasn't seen a ton of time, but maybe, I don't know. Um, do you rotate goalkeepers? Emily Boyd
Yeah.
she's been coming back from injury that was keeping her out of. She wasn't able to play the first. What was it? What was the game where Nair was out? There was a game. Oh, the Mexico friendly. That's what it was. I was like, what was the game?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you rotate goalkeepers? We've seen some teams do that. It's traditional, right? Usually that you let your backup goalkeeper get cup time. So I don't know. I just
Yeah.
think they have a lot of, like I said, I think they have a lot of options in the midfield, a lot of options in the attack, and that's great. That's what you want. Those are the speedy physical players that you want to have fresh legs. But yeah, my questions are more like what happens, and even just like Nagasato and Recaro, they've been warriors in that defensive midfield too. So
Yeah, no, I'm
yeah,
curious about it. I mean, shout out to Sarah. She said, she's asking us how we expect Chris Petroselli to handle the Challenge Cup, and will we see a rotation of players? Is Sarah Griffin going to get the start? I mean, I think we're making the case, right? We've highlighted the rookies and we've talked a bit about second-year players and maybe the lack of minutes that we've seen there. So I would hope that Challenge Cup is an opportunity that the coaching staff wants to utilize for those players specifically. I mean, we haven't really seen Yuli Bianchi with this team, and this was a player that the franchise was excited to introduce. That they were excited about their, the signing and an arrival of this player. But with the exception of some minutes against Mexico in a friendly and some, I think, second half minutes against NWSL sides, we haven't actually seen a start from Bianchi. We haven't seen this player get to build over the course of a game uh, with her new club, the Chicago Red Stars. So I would like to see it. I don't know if we will. Challenge Cup, though, I mean, like, maybe talking about it a little bit is like this type of tournament that can can maybe kind of like aid a team at certain times. I think when we saw in that round one Challenge Cup match, we saw a win for Kansas City Current. We saw really good performance for Orlando Pride. They unfortunately just were not able to hang on for a win at the end of that, but really large stretches of that game where we just really got to see players kind of embrace their roles. Thought it was like Emily Madrill's one of her better games with the Pride as well. So this whole concept of like the Challenge Cup kind of coming right in the nick of time for certain teams who are sort of trying to figure themselves out, or right their ship. And I'm wondering, or slash maybe hopeful, that for the coaching staff, for certain Red Stars players who are putting in the work and maybe not seeing the minutes, that maybe this is a game where we're going to see some different things. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see why not, right?
I would like to, but I don't know. I think maybe even for Houston Dash too. Like, I don't want to, you know, there's a lot of players on the Houston Dash team that I know you and I are excited about and that we love to cover and talk about and stuff. But in terms of their regular season, how they've been kind of navigating things, kind of streaky at times. Honestly, just they have an attacking line that are still, you know, kind of trying to figure some things out. New head coach and Sam Lady, who's trying to figure things out and positionally for certain players and stuff like that. So I'm also kind of curious if on the Houston Dash side of things that they're also looking at this Challenge Cup game in a similar lens, where it's like, maybe let's try to tweak some things and get out there and have a go.
Yeah, I mean, I think rotation is going to be key. I think you just survive in advance, to be completely honest. Yeah. Um, you're going to rotate. It's going to be a little bit loose, but I don't know. Houston's also interesting. They don't play as well at home as they do
On the
away.
road,
They
yes,
also just played a very, very weird game on the weekend. So I don't know exactly what their mindset, and they lost that game.
yeah.
So I don't know exactly how they're feeling going
Like,
into this. But maybe they don't want to try stuff. Maybe they want to do the opposite. They only
does
played
that
52
count?
minutes over the weekend. Maybe they're like, let's crush. I don't know.
I know I'm over here like, does that like
Yeah.
does that motivate you in other ways? We're just like, that was
I don't know.
stolen from me. The weather stole this game.
Right.
It stole my minutes. I would imagine that like maybe there was a certain level of scrimmage or training that they kind of like had to make up for in
Keep
terms of
fitness
like
up, I would
to keep
think,
their
right?
fitness,
Yeah.
yeah, to keep and
Right.
maintain their fitness from what they didn't get out of that game. Because I mean, God, they had these two teams waiting forever to try to humor a restart, and that restart just never came. The game just got fully abandoned. So yeah, no, there's totally those angles too. Like, are they just going to be motivated by the fact that like they were not able to get a full 90-minute game in, especially if you're some of those starters who were appearing in that game. I don't know. The other thing about Challenge Cup is that it just kind of be chaotic as well. I think when we're looking at like the teams who are involved in the central region as well, like I don't know if it's just like the Midwesterner in me, but I love like watching this central region kind of go head to head. I think they're kind of like in last year's Challenge Cup, they provided, I think, some of the more fun Challenge Cup games when it was kind of that preseason-y tournament. But this year, it's not necessarily the case. Like, these games are like smack dab in the middle of a week and going to run concurrent throughout the league. But
Yeah. I mean, I think the other interesting thing for the Red Stars is, again, I don't know what they're talking about internally in terms of expectations for the
yeah,
rest of the year. Like I said, they're currently in 11th, though it's all very close, right? Nobody has that many points, but um are they having discussions about wanting to really gun for Challenge Cup? Maybe they're like, this is our chance. This is our,
yeah,
or like you said, our momentum builder. Or maybe it's, we don't have the capacity actually to really focus on Challenge Cup because we need to really get 3 points next weekend. Like, I'd be really curious to know the way they're approaching that, because I do think that mentality, they're going to go out and compete no matter what. But when you are like a quarter of the way through the season and you're still finding your footing, I'm just interested to see.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna like have fun with the prediction, and I'm gonna say another draw.
You freaking love a prediction, dude.
I
I
love a
think that's
prediction.
so great. You're brave. You're the only brave person in the world willing to say, here's what it's gonna be.
Thanks, buddy. And then sometimes I write it. Sometimes I put it pen to
Yeah.
paper, and people can blast me for it. But that's part of being brave, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I want to say like a draw that feels like a dub at this point. It just sort of feels like even you never know what's going to happen until the end of the season actually is in front of you. But I think for right now, it's early enough to still try to have some fun with some things. And I don't know if there's going to be enough for a win on the road. And if weather is cooperative, I'm going to say that the Red Stars pull off a draw. Pull off a draw that feels like one of those moral victories kind of thing. We'll see.
I mean, yeah, I think kind of like we said, I think that they're gonna give some up, and I think they're gonna score some. And
Yeah,
that's all.
this
All I
team
can say.
sure does love to concede but also score goals. So we'll see. We'll have to talk about it all when we link back up and join everyone to chat about all things Chicago Red Stars on CHGO. I mean, if you like what we do here, one of the best ways to go ahead and support the content is with a CHGO diehard membership. So make sure you go on and sign up, because you get access to all sorts of great perks when you sign up for a CHGO diehard a membership. You get access to podcasts, live shows on every single team, every single day. There are even some post-game shows that you get to watch if you are a fan of Chicago sports. You get access to premium written content for all members at allchgo.com. And you get access to all sorts of dope merch, because you get a free t-shirt when you become a member, and you get access to the members only Discord, the CHGO Lounge. But it looks like that's it for us today. I really just want to say thanks everyone for joining us. Chat seemed to be active. It looks like some folks had some questions or had some things to say or had some feelings about the Chicago Red Stars, and we just want to encourage you to have those thoughts, feelings, and questions around Chicago, especially when Claire and I link back up and do the show. We always love to hear from you all and talk about all things Chicago Red Stars. But that's it. That's a wrap for us. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks to chat all things Chicago Red Stars. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.